I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Kat DeLorean Seymour, the founder and CEO of DNG Motors and daughter of legendary automotive designer John DeLorean. Kat's career experience includes programming, network, and system administration, as well as cybersecurity roles at a variety of well-known corporations, and her education includes the University of North Texas, Gill St. Bernard's, and the Lawrenceville School. As the founder of DeLorean Next Generation Motors, Kat describes it as a dream empowerment company fueled by the manufacture of amazing automobiles, focused on a nonprofit mission to sell Detroit-built supercars to fund educational opportunities and provide mentorship, opportunities, and support for young people. So, Kat, welcome. It is a true pleasure to have you with me today.
It's wonderful to be here. You covered everything. We're done. It was great. Thanks for having me. That was an awesome intro.
World's shortest interview. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
You did your homework. That was impressive. Awesome.
I did a lot of homework. And so today we're talking about your work building the next generation DeLorean supercar, as well as your nonprofit mission. So I want to start out by asking for an overview of DNG Motors. I think most people probably aren't familiar with this company, and they need to be, because you are continuing a tremendous legacy and taking it into the future. So where did the company start? Where is it going? And what are your nonprofit social goals too?
Thank you for asking. DNG Motors is this amazing, it's more than just a company. It's just this organic growth of this wonderful idea. And it gets to embrace my father's legacy in this magical way that the only way I could describe it was a dream empowerment company fueled by automobiles. The whole company began because I've always called myself a mentor first and a technologist second. And I've loved teaching since I was a child. And I've always incorporated it into everything that I do. My entire career was built on opportunities that were given to me by others when I didn't have the experience, but I was willing to be mentored and learn. And so I really believe in this path forward to being able to achieve your dreams. But you also have to know they're out there. You have to be able to experience them. You have to have the opportunities to learn. And when we were living in this mill in New Hampshire, one of my children, their significant other studied automotive technology, and they're brilliant. And so I said, why didn't you study? I mean, not that brilliant people can't go into automotive technology. Let me correct the way this story goes. They were very interested in engineering concepts. And so I said, why didn't you go into automotive engineering? And they said I had to choose between, auto shop or engineering, and they're going to pick cars every time. And so I said, well, let's change that. Let's bring an automotive engineering program to the school district. Let's see what we can do. And we started working with the school district to try and create one program inside of one school in this little tiny town in New Hampshire. And as we started to build this, I was also seeking to reach out to DeLorean fans because I wanted to tell the story of the inspiration that my father's car has been to the people that have owned it. And there's these amazing stories that I'm really not sure anybody else has a collection the way that I do, because people want to tell me about their experience with their car. And they're almost all universally the same and still incredibly varied. They all start with the first time they saw or heard about the car. And then they go on to how this experience completely changed their life. No matter when they saw it, it was all about the things that then happened. It could be they first saw it in the movie and they grew up to be an automotive designer, or one person started saving their money at 10 years old in their birthdays so that they could get one when they got older. They became a finance manager because they learned so much about money wanting to get this car. So people's lives were just built in these incredible ways through the inspiration and the dreams fueled by this amazing car. And so I wanted to, the connection I had with the community, I wanted to give them something positive. And I felt that this was a really good way to bring a positive collection of stories to help combat a lot of the negativity that was out there around the car. As I started to do this, This story is actually wild, but this is the only way to really describe what DNG is and how it is this organic movement. I am trying to register domains, and I want to register this one, DeLorean Legacy. The day before I go to register this domain, I had been contacted by this automotive designer, Angel Guerra, who wanted to just tell me about how much he loved my father and this design of a car he had made. And we started talking. And I go to register this website on which I want to create a way for DeLorean fans to engage with me and tell me their stories. It's parked. And what that means for people who aren't technologists is it's owned, but there's nothing on it. So a lot of times that'll happen when somebody wants you to buy the domain from them, or they'll do it if they want to, buy up space that maybe they don't want other people to have. And it was DeLorean Legacy. And I said, well, what's going on here? As I am freaking out trying to find out what's happening, and I really actually mean as I'm sending text messages, I get a message on LinkedIn from Angel who says, by the way, I registered the site and I just wanted it to be a place to honor your dad. And we wanted to have a place maybe where people could submit letters where they could say how much your dad meant to them. And I'm sitting here and I said, are you kidding me? The site that I want to register, you have and you built what I want on it. And I went back and looked at the LinkedIn messages when they wrote the Wired article. I literally was freaking out about how they registered the domain the night before I went looking for it. It was
That is so awesome.
So kismet. And so this is really how DNG has come to be from that first moment until today. Every success that we've had has come in this wildly synchronicity way. And so, long story, a little bit shorter. From there, we started talking, and he was interested in what we were doing with the mill. And he said, let's build a one-off art project, and we'll source parts for a car, and we'll actually film putting this together to help give the kids, the students, something to see, something we can film and share. As we started to do this, as we started to try and bring people in to help build this one car in this one school district in this one situation, people start hearing that I'm building a car. I'm not building a car. Yeah, you are. You're building a car. No, I'm not building a car. But people would come to me and they'd ask me what I was doing. Pardon me. Let me drink for a moment. And then when we would tell them, they went, oh, wow, we need that so much. Can you bring that to everybody? We have a lack of good engineering education. Can you bring this, worldwide, nationwide? Ho, wait, can I just get it in New Hampshire first?
Well, Kat, if I could jump in,
Yeah.
What this says to me is there are some brands, there are some visions and some legacies that are larger than life.
Yes.
And this reminds me of Harley Davidson, right? It's an American legend. It's a part of our culture, and it's something that can't just go away. Now, in their case, the Harley Davidson company, I believe they were bought by a foreign firm in the 1970s. And they went into decline, their reputation suffered, and the employees recognized that this vision was so important to the American dream. They bought the company back and they said, we want to produce the absolute best Harley Davidson that we can produce, right? That is the kind of company that you were talking about. That is the DeLorean name. It is one of those things that is larger than life. It
Yes.
captivates and inspires the imagination.
Yes. And that's exactly what we're trying to capitalize on right here in order to bring the power of dreams to everyone. So what do you do with one of the most valuable and powerful brands in the world? Well, what if you used it to be a giant beacon to bring people together who are all seeking to bring services and help to these students, and then offer it to the students? Because what we've been able to do here is not reinvent a whole lot of wheels. I call it, it's something I say that it's innovative but not revolutionary, in that we are doing something that we are just bringing together people who have really class act programs. We have some of our own in-house designed IP, some of programs that we've worked to build ourselves, but overall, we're just bringing together people who offer these services already, that have been vetted through us, that want to focus on the students to say, hey, did you know that if you want to go become an automotive engineer, here's somebody who can help you find the apprenticeship programs. Here's somebody who can help you find the after school programs to get you interested. Here are all of these resources available to you. Here are scholarships. Here is even like life support, and here's, social support. Here's places to go. I want to even have, if you have 1-800-ADULT questions, I say, here's a phone number to call. The idea is just to bring together all of these resources and use this powerful brand to say, how can we just change the world for one person at a time through mentorship, opportunity, and support? And it has grown organically into this just wonderful thing where people say, hey, I have these goods or services. I would like to be a part of this. Can I offer apprenticeship opportunities? I had somebody contact me the other day who said, wow, glass blowing is a dying art, and that's causing a loss of industrial glass blowers. What if you started this industrial glass blowing program? Because here's all of these teachers and resources for you. Now we have a whole new pathway we can explore. And the idea is to allow this to continue to grow like this for any dream a student will have, so that we can show them, hey, anything you want to do, in anything you're passionate about, it's out there. If you're good at lawyering, guess what? The automotive industry needs lawyers. You can do what you love and what you're good at. You just have to know you can.
Yeah. Again, resurrecting and transforming the American automotive dream. So before we get deeper into the future of DNG, I want to do a refresher in history for the audience. In one of the most famous moments of cinematic history, when Marty McFly hits 88 miles an hour, he leaves flaming tire tracks down the street as he travels back in time. That is your father's car, the DMC DeLorean. What kind of memories does that moment in the film bring back for you?
The film is hard to talk about because people ask me, do you remember the first time you saw the movie? How can I answer that? Do you remember the first time you learned math? No, because it's always been a part of your life. This movie is so prevalent, so much a part of who I am and my existence. I can't tell you the first time it came to be, because it's so much just a part of me and who I am. But that also creates this complicated relationship with a movie that I should have the same love and adoration for. And I do, but I can't, because I have had it. There is something about being excited and fanatical about something, and then another thing about having everybody who is excited and fanatical about it always constantly telling you about it all the time. And I tell people, right, like, it's so much, you can't really separate it from the movie and enjoying that experience. It becomes just part of the reality of your life. So it's hard for me to really give the movie the appreciation and the adoration it deserves and that I actually have for it, because it is so complicated in my life. And that's the best answer I can give you, is that that's what it means to me. It's just a lot of complicated stuff.
No, you know what? I know exactly what you mean. And I think one of the frailties of the human mind and the way that we perceive things is that we tend to kind of boil things down to one or two key moments, right? And so people remember the DeLorean in the movie, and they forget the fact that John was the master behind the Pontiac GTO. And that is a car where old school car guys told me about that when I was a kid. They said that, younger guys wanted to go out and get the car to impress the girl and take her on the date, right? They wanted the big muscle manly car. Okay, well, great. They couldn't afford it. And so here's some 60 or 70-year-old guy driving down the street in a Corvette, and the young guy is in, their station wagon, right? Well, so the GTO was affordable. It was American muscle that younger men could buy, right?
Yeah.
And that was something that was incredibly unique and powerful at the time. And yet that is largely forgotten in favor of this one moment in a Robert Zemeckis film. So I know what you're saying.
Well, I love that you bring that up, and exactly that way too, because the way that you just conceptualized what the GTO was, if you actually stop and think about that, that's the moment car culture changed forever. So my father had this intense impact on our culture. Route 66 was like, it became as popular as it did because partially of his See the World or See America campaign. And he actually tried to have the billboards pulled down off Route 66 because he wanted the campaign to have people driving and seeing. So this whole love of road trips that we now have, van life, you could say, started with my dad and his marketing campaigns. The impact that he's had, the safety features that we have on cars today, that he risked he risked and possibly cost him his career. If you trace back what really happened, it's likely that he left because of the seatbelts and the lies that were being told by the automotive industry. These are intensely impactful things that have changed our entire world. And because of this one moment that he's remembered for, that then also made the second part of the story so much bigger. You now have him as an honorary inductee with a Distinguished Service Award instead of being inducted into the Automotive Hall of Fame, when he is one of the most influential automotive engineers of all time. Because people don't want to remember what he really did. They just want to remember the flashy stuff. And that's a shame.
He was pushing the boundaries. He developed new higher performance transmissions. He developed new higher performance automobiles. He always kind of kept an eye towards pushing the technological boundaries. And the DMC DeLorean was, I think, the peak of that. And I think one of the real tragedies, this is something I'd wondered about when I was researching this. The original company, DMC Motors, went out of business in 1982. So Back to the Future came out in 1985. And I thought, those are so close together. If that movie had been just a little bit earlier, I bet history would have been written very differently.
I believed that for a while, until I started to actually uncover a lot of what actually happened. And the forces against him at that time were so great. There's nothing that could have stopped what happened to him. It was multiple different angles that were coming at him. He had sabotage from the inside of the company. He had his own personal sabotage going on at home. He had actually the one thing that General Motors did do was pull the financing, like the GM financing, because everybody's like, oh, GM did all this stuff. They had a small part in it, but they weren't the big driver that everybody thinks they were. Every single piece kind of had something that played into it. The financing was just the red herring that was used to frame the bust thing. The overall problems that were going on were so much greater, and the forces that were against him were so much bigger than just the story that was told. I don't believe he would have succeeded. If he did, they would have probably shot him. That's how much there was so much going against him. And I don't mean the proverbial they and the conspiracy thing. I literally mean in his life, in everywhere, from his family to his business partners, everybody was looking to do something bad to him. Who can win? Who can survive that? So, and tragically, I've also learned that a lot of it was because he was overly trusting. He was he really surrounded himself with a lot of bad people who just really took advantage of him. He had no chance. He had no chance.
Car culture was so, it was entrenched, it was locked in, and it was so different in that era, right? And this is something a lot of younger people may not be familiar with this, but back in the day, you had the big three, right? You had Ford, General Motors, or Chevy, and then you had Dodge, Chrysler. And it was like you buy one of those. And in the early 1980s, that was still very, very prevalent. It didn't change until the 90s, right? I mean, during the 1980s, you had this percolation of Japanese car manufacturers. And at first, when Japanese cars first entered the market, it was, you buy it because it's cheap and durable, but, then you save up and buy a real car later. And over time, the quality improved, the performance improved, all of that. And Japanese automakers largely displaced American sports cars, American, trucks. I mean, nowadays, not just Japanese, you also have a lot of European brands. So America has changed so dramatically in terms of the makeup of cars on the road. I think, the DeLorean vision today would be much more accepted than it was back then. Because back then it was like, okay, you buy one of the big three or else.
Yeah.
Right?
And also, it was so. Sorry, let me go back to actually what your train just put my train on. It's a better story. I love that you bring this up, the Japanese cars taking over the market, because it's one of the things that my father was already screaming before he left General Motors in 1973. And he said, you need to pay attention to what's going on here. And then the gas crisis hits, which, let me put this on record right now, is why the car is so slow. All of the other cars in that, the Corvette was barely faster than the DeLorean at the time. So let's put that to rest. But also his business prowess. So if you go and read his book On a Clear Day, you can on a clear day you can see General Motors. Some of the business practices and things he called out in that book were revolutionary at the time, and you go, that can't be. He literally figured out that we were spending all of our advertising money on the highest performing products. He went and did a scientific study that said, hey, you will improve the value of your underperforming products if you focus your advertising around them. And then he took it to the 14th floor and they said, no, this isn't the way it's done. He said, but I've proved that this is the way it should be done. And they said, no, because it's not how it is done. He was the first person to say, this is what we should do. And that is just the way it is today. He was the first person to say that. And I mean, his business prowess was intensely revolutionary. His structure of his business, which they called funky and whatever, used it to call him fraudulent, is the base structure of every corporation today. He was like, look, if my car company goes bankrupt, at least I still have my manufacturing company, which is exactly what happened. When DeLorean Motor Company went out of business, DeLorean Manufacturing still existed in Utah. It was just a way to protect all of your different positive components of what you were building from each other. And people called him a wizard, burn him at the stake because of what he's doing.
Well, he was on the cusp. I mean, one of the things, I didn't know this until I went through and read. So the DMC DeLorean was a V6. It was European designed. It's a little bit smaller body in terms of sports car. So this was something that was aligned with the 1973 oil crisis, right? That was something that made an impact. And he was like, look, we can't just put this gas guzzling V8 in it anymore. We have to think smarter, And that was something, again, I mean, now most American cars are V6s, but back in the day, right, it was the Smokey and the Bandit, Pontiac Trans Am, enormous V8, and that's wonderful until you have to fill it up. And so.
Well, you want to know what's even wilder? This is crazy. So he was, if you look at the engine he was actually trying to put in the car, he was having Bunky Knudsen and Smokey Yunick design an engine that was based on the rotary engine, and it would have been an adiabatic rotary engine. You can actually match the beginning of this company that designed this exact engine for NASA to the newspaper article that my father is not getting out of this mess. A week later, a new company was founded, and NASA researched the engine he meant to put in the car to build an actual spaceship because it was so fuel efficient. I mean, they didn't build like what they did. They burned the spaceship on coal and stuff like that. But it was so fuel efficient and so effective. As soon as he couldn't use his design, NASA took it and built a spaceship with it. That is how revolutionary he was. That's wild.
Yeah. Well, so let me spin that around and bring it back to current day. So in terms of the company, you are looking at a lot of nonprofit goals, mentorship, and it is bringing fans and supporters and people who loved your father and his vision out of the woodwork.
Yes.
I understand you were also looking at eventually building supercars,
Yes.
right? And if people visit the website, and I will drop a link to the website in the YouTube show notes, they can see some of the artist visions of what an updated DMC DeLorean may look like. But I wanted to ask, what is your vision and how are you thinking of continuing this amazing bleeding edge technological legacy?
Thank you for asking. So the car that we currently have, the Model-JZD, is designed around what I've learned during this journey that we just kind of went through together. When I started to uncover a lot of my father's story in the development of the car, we had shifted from this wrecked car one-off thing that we were building to a full production build. So we had to scrap our idea originally, which was to build it on a wrecked C8 because we had a bunch that we could get from the floods that had just happened, unfortunately. And we were thinking we could get a really good body style out of it for not a lot of money, and it didn't need to run. It just needed to, show how it all went together. I'm now on a work trip for something else, and we're looking for a new chassis because we've decided to go with a full build. And my husband finds an article in this Corvette concept magazine and finds out that the original mid-engine Corvette was actually researched and commissioned by my father. The Aerovet and the Reynolds aluminum vet that are currently in the GM Heritage Center were his two prized non-possessions. He would park these cars outside of his window so that he could turn his chair and see them whenever. And he would just drive these two cars, and they look like naked aluminum Corvettes. And if you look at the interior of these two cars, they are identical to Proto 1 of the DMC. Why? My father wanted to build this. That was supposed to be the DeLorean. He wanted to give Zora never got his mid-engine Corvette. He was forced into early retirement because of the rules of the day. And he tried to purchase the engineering from General Motors to make the DMC a mid-engine Corvette. General Motors rightfully said no. And so I learned all of this. And I said to my husband, I said, so you mean to tell me we're looking for a chassis for our car, and General Motors this year, right now, just released the car my dad wanted to build the car on? And he says, yeah. I said, well, there you go. Let's build it on a Corvette platform. So the idea of the JZD is to answer the question, what's the car your dad wanted to build? Here you go. Ta-da, there you go. And that allows us to develop the program, because what's most important, you started by saying, I'm rebuilding a car. No, I'm building a program that's going to result in a car. And that's actually important because it's not about the car. So the aftermarket car concept allowed us to close the chapter on my father's story, build the car he wanted to build, focus on the program because it's an aftermarket car. Where's your prototype? Go down to your Chevy dealership, give it a drive. I'm going to have a high performance version of that. There you go. So it allowed us to actually focus on what was important, developing a good program for the kids. Now, what happens after that? We have build partners. We have engineering excellence so that we can bring the hand-built supercar experience to Detroit the same way that you could get if you go overseas. And that be done.
Would that be customizing? I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around this. So you'd be basically taking kind of a stock Corvette and then customizing it, right? And
Yes.
I mean, there are numerous versions of that.
Yes.
There was a movie about Ford and the Shelby Cobra,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
That would be another, yeah.
And you could
And
look
then
at
AMC
you could
Mercedes
look
as
at
well.
Callaway, Lingenfelter, both do the same thing with the Corvettes, right? So you have it's again innovative, not revolutionary, but
Yeah.
specifically the Corvette is about closing the chapter on my dad's story. The second car, the hand-built supercar, comes in by allowing people who already have excellence in building automobiles who are willing to open their doors up to student experiences to participate in building our cars. So we're not going to start to be competition where we come in and add more chaos to the mess. We're going to craft with excellence of people who already know what they're doing to deliver you special edition vehicles that will then fund the program and education. So the idea is everybody gets what they want. How do you run a charity that doesn't require donations? Well, you give people what they want. And in the end, what we really want from that is to also open up doors that may not have been opened by saying, hey, consider allowing our students to be part of this incredible opportunity where they may not have been able to before, to build with this team that you may not have access to, so that we can actually, do something that will change their life forever. That will create this impact for them.
Well, and it seems like that is such a win-win, right? I mean, General Motors and Chevrolet would win. It allows them to sell more Corvettes as well as honor the memory of, an amazing designer, right? And it allows you to help fund the nonprofit and meet those social action goals. So, yeah, it sounds like a win-win. Now, one thing that did pop into my mind was the retro car craze. And it sounds like the direction you're going is very, very high tech, right? But I wanted to ask about this because, Dodge, one of the things they did, this goes back several years now, was they said, you know what? People liked those classic body lines. Let's update those cars so they meet today's emissions and power standards and all that stuff. And then we'll just relaunch those cars that people used to love. And they have quite a following there, right?
Yes.
Have you thought about that? You mentioned this mid-engine Corvette chassis that your father developed. Like, would there be any future potential for actually just building the 1960s, 70s version?
So there are some really interesting opportunities that, for the people who are my Pontiac fans, don't take this the wrong way. I am a V8 gasoline girl, internal combustion engine girl all the way. But let me just finish the sentence. Per regulations, it's a lot easier to build things that have less aerodynamic lines than you once did. Now, you're going to run into issues with all the worries of, range and things like this. It doesn't matter what you're going to use to fuel it. Let's just imagine it's electric, but let's say somebody's also come up with another alternative fuel source. The doors that have been opened by the research that has gone into the electric car has opened the opportunity to bring style back to the automotive industry. So, regardless of the actual fuel behind it and what that means, because you can answer it a bunch of different ways, doesn't have to be today's petroleum or tomorrow's electricity. We now have the option to explore different options with our styling. And heck yes, we want to bring back stuff that nobody is going to argue with me if I say every car looks the same today. Nobody. Yeah. So what is going on? We no longer have the relationship with our cars that we once did. Half of the kids today don't even care about driving. How do you get them to care about it again? You have to bring back the personality, the fun, the enjoyment of driving. And that's not going to happen if everything's just stale.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it adds back in, again, this is something from American car culture that I think was lost. And I think when the foreign cars flooded the market, right? Again, the late 80s through the 00s, it wiped away a lot of American car culture,
Yeah.
And that some of that is just changing times, right? And I think EVs, in some ways, EVs touch on some of that, but it's very different now, right? Today's cars are cold and sterile,
Hmm.
and they're almost an extension of your smartphone.
Yeah.
And that's really good. Like I drive a Tesla. That's my daily driver, right? But it is not the same thing
I
as
don't
the
know how
muscle
you do
cars that we
that.
grew up with.
I'm not knocking Teslas. I don't know. I can't, as somebody who like needs to be in my car, I got in a Tesla and I'm like, this is so foreign to me. I feel
Yeah, it's
weird.
different.
I can't exist in this space. There's no car like around me. So but that's to each their own. I'm not somebody who judges anybody who wants to drive whatever they want. Um, I guess I don't know. I probably just said something accidentally controversial there. But um I really believe that we have also lost with the extension of the smartphone. We've forgotten the joy of driving. We have forgotten to give people that joy of driving. There's a reason why the only people I see really excited about their cars anymore are Porsche people. Like I mean, when I say this, I mean there's only one like group of car people I can see anymore who are really excited about the new things coming out, that they have this excitement about driving in a way that really feels like it embraces what car culture used to be. I don't see that as much in the other spaces as I used to because, well, let's think about it. What teenager can afford any car, let alone a Honda Civic is $50,000? How am
Yeah.
I going to afford my that was the cheapo car you bought because you couldn't even afford the Trans Am anymore, and so now you went and bought the Honda Civic and you souped that up. How am I going to soup it up?
Well,
I can't even afford the 50 grand.
and that's what I look at. Like, when I was a kid. I mean, I was born in '76, right? And so, in the mid to late '90s, you saw glass packs on Hondas
Yeah,
everywhere, right?
everywhere.
And yeah, they're annoying. Most people absolutely hate them. But that was the young man's equivalent
Yeah.
of the older man's V8, right? It's like they couldn't afford the V8, but they could afford the Honda. So what can we do with the Honda? We'll put a glass pack on it and make it loud, and then it'll make it feel like we have a race car. And again, they could pick up the girl and feel manly. So
Really? Did that work? Did anybody with glass packs actually pick anybody up? Oh my goodness. I'm sorry.
oh, I don't. You know what? I don't know. During that era, I don't know if I should out myself. I had a Chevy Camaro, was amazing half the time, and then the other half the time I was working on it. So,
Yeah,
you know,
I had a 94 Camaro. I had a 94 Z28, and then my 98 Trans Am is still in my driveway because, yeah, I
because
love
it won't start, right? Because the transmission broke.
no, actually it was it's a tragic
No,
story.
I'm just teasing you. I'm teasing
It
you. I
it
I
was
spent a
borrowed.
lot of time under mine fixing stuff. So
No, no, mine was in perfect shape. It was in perfect shape, 75,000 miles, and it was perfect. It was borrowed without my permission, called stealing, I think, by somebody who didn't know how to drive the car. And I got a phone call, not even knowing the car was gone at 3 o'clock in the morning, that the car was now totaled. And it wasn't actually totaled. The guy at the tow yard wanted the engine in the car because it was in such good condition that they dragged it around the tow yard to grind off the rear end of the car and had the insurance company total it. And when I showed up with the check to get the car, they already had it under the lift to pull the engine. And I was like, I don't think so. I do not think so. And they really tried to take the car from me. But the only thing that was really wrong with it, other than them grinding off my rear end, which resulted in a new Borla, not a glass pack, was that the axle broke in half. So it wasn't the transmission; it was the axle broke in half and went flying somewhere. And we took it to a DeLorean shop that fixed it for me. And it was at Don's shop in Anaheim until I actually got it back. It still needs repair. We haven't finished the rest of it. It got to the point of where Jason and I had restored it to it needed its brakes fixed and some bleeding and then cosmetic work. And then I just kind of left it because I didn't want to deal with bleeding the brakes. And then it's been sitting ever since. So,
uh
yeah.
The Camaro was always an interesting one. There is a story, I'm not sure if it's true or not, that the Camaro actually beat the Corvette on the track. And since it costs so much less, Chevy executives said, okay, well, we can't have that. So they basically put a truck differential in it to lower the whole thing down so it wouldn't have the top end.
I can see that happening. I know that they wouldn't let the Banshee out because it was good competition for the Corvette, and then they turned it into the Corvette. But I can see them nerfing the Camaro because nothing was allowed to compete with the Corvette at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah. No, that was the golden child, right? And it was so expensive. That was the luxury sports performance car. And so GM always kind of kept that. I had a Corvette later, and I loved it, but they have their own, like, this is just me, but every bump you go over, you lose paint from the bottom, right?
No,
So,
yeah, okay. So mine is very low, but I love her, and I drove. So I have a 2016 Z06, and I drove her from Dallas to Houston and back, and then she drove all the way to New Hampshire. I've driven her all over the place, and I love her, and I will die in this car. No, my Trans Am. I have to be. No, my kids want my Trans Am. My kids actually fight over the Trans Am and not the Corvette. Go figure. But I love her.
Again, yeah, and different cars have different character.
Yeah.
So, for me, now that I'm in full-on dad mode, I'm doing the electric cars. It's grocery runs and stuff like that.
I'm
No
sorry.
gas costs. Yeah, well, it's a change of life, right? It's like we don't like to admit it, and we justify it. It could be worse. I'm not driving a station wagon. I've managed to avoid that trap. I'm not driving a minivan. So, it's a sedan, right? I'm still in reasonably.
You tell yourself
I'm
whatever you need to.
Yeah, it's
In your
reasonable
cool dad
space.
car.
Well, yeah, we've got a no minivans rule, and I'm trying like heck to avoid station wagons. So, yeah, I mean, again, these pieces of American car culture are they have helped define America during the 20th century. This is something that it helped shape and transform so much of our country. And I'm not sure. Well, I think everyone has seen these visions of the 50s, right? It was drive through, drive up, everything.
Yeah.
People would stay in their car. They would drive up to the restaurant. They'd have the box on the window seat, drive-in movies. In fact, the first movie that I saw, I vaguely remember glimpses of it. I was about a year old, was Star Wars, 1977, at the drive-in.
Wow.
So that's American
cool.
car culture right there.
Yeah. Yeah. My earliest memories of cars are actually driving around. So I didn't know what it was until I actually posted it on social media and realized what actually I was driving. I always had a kit car that I drove around the farm, and it was actually a Morgan. So at 2 years old, I didn't have a Power Wheels. I had a Morgan that I drove around on my farm. I've been driving my whole life, and I hate what's happened to car culture because it's how I met my husband. We started talking at the table about he made fun of my truck, and then we ended up in that night in the parking lot, hoods up. And I tell people that's why we got married, because so much of just how we met was a 4-hour conversation about cars and then comparing engines in the parking lot. That's going away. That's no longer something that we gather around. The people who show up to Cars and Coffee are overwhelmingly our age. And then what happens when we all go away, right?
A lot of that started to change, I think. My dad was a VW Porsche mechanic in the 1970s. And there was this joy of knowing how the engine was put together. Yeah. And I think he, as well as many other people, he went on to a different career. But I remember him feeling really pissed off about emission systems in the 1980s. And then as those became computerized, it left most car people behind, right? And, and today, again, like electric vehicles, I don't know how it works, but I don't
No.
want to know,
And
right?
it's
So,
dangerous too. That's a fantastic thing to bring up. That's one of the goals that we actually have, that we keep in our head, is how do we create something that will get a mom and daughter, dad and son back in the garage working on the cars again, because I can't even change a spark plug or probably my oil on my Corvette anymore, right?
and so my best friend in high school, it's amazing you mentioned that. Him and his stepdad did exactly that. His stepdad got a good deal on a 69 Camaro, and in the mid 1990s, they were under that thing every night. It
Yeah.
became this father-son bonding activity, and they rebuilt the car. They put in a custom transmission, the whole 9 yards.
Yes.
And that was their thing.
And it's a lot of fun to work with your hands. I remember when Jason and I put the Trans Am back together, the only thing I will never do again is suspension. We had to grind off the suspension, die grinders going at 3 a.m. in the morning in the garage. But other than that, it was this magical time we had together where there was nothing but us and the machine, and we got to share everything while working. It takes away from the whole world disappears, and suddenly it's just you and the car and what's happening in the car, and the car has its own personality, its own way of this should work, but it's not, because the car is just temperamental, right? It's so we're losing that. We're losing the personality of our cars, the style of our cars, car culture, a love of cars, and it's turning into, I just want the car to drive me from here to there. Forget it. Let's just focus on teleportation, because driving itself is this just emotional, powerful experience. You are in control of this machine that can take you from here to as far as the oceans go. You can go anywhere. And that's just freedom. Like, we don't appreciate that anymore. We don't appreciate the joy that we can get from driving. We just want to go, traffic, this sucks.
Yeah. Well, and there are advantages to having something that's hands off. So with the Tesla,
Sorry,
this
don't
is
mean to
just
pick
me.
on your car again.
No, that's okay. I found that it is very intuitive. It does take a little bit of time to kind of get used to it, but once you kind of make that mental map of, okay, here's what they're thinking of, right? It becomes very intuitive. Now, I did a lot of conference travel last year, and I had, let me see, I had a variety of different cars. One of them was a brand new Volvo, top of the line Volvo rental. Another one was I lucked out, actually. They didn't have the car that I'd rented, and they said, oh, we'll give you a rental Mercedes instead. So it was a brand new, wonderful Mercedes. And those, I absolutely, I maybe I shouldn't say this. I hated them. I got in the car. It's like, okay, here's the key. Oh, there's no key fob. You have to push a button. You push the button. Does the car start? It's so quiet you can't tell if it's running or not. And then it's like, how do I shift? How do I use their wonky custom navigation, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's definitely an area of struggle. And right now, it feels like cars are kind of lurching into the 21st century, but haven't quite made it yet with a lot of manufacturers.
Well, because they're just trying to add bells and whistles, and they're not.
Yeah.
Form is no longer following function. It's like, again, the reason we had to roll back all this stupid push button stuff is it's a lot easier to tactile change things without looking away than to have just a screen, which is just there. So we need to think about the form and the function, which brings me to a question that I legitimately want to ask you, not to pick on your car, but I work with somebody who is a fire and rescue. Aren't you concerned about the lack of ability to open your door in multiple situations? Because if you're stuck, here's the thing about them not being able to get to you. If you need to be the one to open the door, fire or not, how many times is somebody in a critical accident conscious enough to open the door? They can't get to your unconscious person. So how is this something that is allowed to be on vehicles when there is no way to get you out unless I jaws of life, which is going to which is going to cost critical time. Maybe your life could have been saved if I could have just opened the door.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a good answer to that. Although the one that I have been interested in lately, and this is on another Tesla thing, is the self-drive. And I have been on several self-driving trips, and my feeling is that there's good and bad there, I guess. The good side is, and I'm sure you've done this too, when you're on a road trip and you're tired and you're starting to kind of nod off and you're slamming caffeine to stay awake, right? That self-drive can actually be pretty handy. And past a certain point of tiredness, a lot of folks don't like to pull off the road and nap, but past a certain point of tiredness, you really should get off the road.
Mm-hmm.
And, for people who don't want to do that, that self-drive at some point drives better than a human being. Although that being said, what I found is self-drive tends to screw up between 1 to 5% of the time. And even at 1% of the time, when you're doing 60, 70 on the freeway, right, that's bad. So,
well, it's also encouraging us to not pay attention. So one of the things about me is if I can, I'm going to drive everywhere I can go. Why? Because I don't care about where I'm going. Have you actually taken the long way across the United States for anything? Because have you seen how beautiful Flagstaff, Arizona is? In the middle of the desert is this beautiful, just mountainous, gorgeous trees. We are missing out on so much of life by just focusing on where we're going instead of where we are and what we're doing. So I am a huge person who says you should not only, now my husband has done it before, but you shouldn't be driving when you're tired because you should be able to enjoy what you're experiencing. It shouldn't be about the grind. It should be, we forget as humans that we have an actual finite amount of time on this planet. There is only one thing on the entire earth that you cannot get back no matter what. Youth, we've even figured out now. Time. You can get in your DeLorean and it's not going to take you back. Sorry, I hate to break it to you. It is the most valuable and precious thing we have. And yet, every second we take it for granted, and we, instead of embracing what we are doing at the moment, which may just be getting from point A to point B, or even scrubbing your floor, we are forgetting that there is joy in everything that we do, and we are meant to embrace each moment. So if all we're focused on is the fact that our car can get us from here to there so we can be further lost in an imaginary world of our phone or fall asleep while we pass through the beauty that's around us, well, I can't exactly get behind that because I have a different philosophy. However, I'm also not going to fault you for it. I might make you feel bad with my stories like this, but I say, do you. I just don't embrace that philosophy because I believe that we are missing out on so much when we do that.
Kat, I can't think of a more profound note to close on than that. I think that is such an incredibly important point. And so let me close by asking what comes next for you and what is coming next for the next generation DeLorean. And just in case I don't forget, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for asking that question. So we are continuing our program with our students, and I encourage everyone to follow DNG Motors on Instagram and Facebook if you're there, and to go to our website. We currently have a super fun cryptic puzzle going on. So if you go and watch the reels that are being released by DNG Motors, there are hidden messages and puzzles in it for you to pick up on, to actually go on a scavenger hunt to kind of find my dad's story. It's a lot of fun. I encourage everybody to do that because I'm never going to change everybody's mind if I just tell you. I want you to go out and find it and have as much fun as I did exploring and getting to know my dad. So come along my journey finding my father and play the puzzles with us, and go and follow how we continue to inspire and support our students by following DNG Motors on our website.
Wonderful. Thank you again so much for your time today,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Oh, and you can follow me if you just want to see me at Cat DeLorean at all these different places. So thank you so much.